Okay, third video. Now we're just going to start to talk about what happens if we reject our null hypothesis when it's actually true. Or the flip side of that is what if we fail to reject our null hypothesis when it actually is false? So we'd be making errors here. So we're going to talk about those errors and the probability of them. I think the probability of them comes in the next video. So right now we're just going to talk about what happens and what are the consequences when we make these errors. So when we draw a conclusion from a significance test, we hope our conclusion will be correct, but sometimes it won't be. There are two types of mistakes we can make. We can reject the null hypothesis when it's actually true. This is going to be known as our type 1 error. Or we can fail to reject a null hypothesis when it's false. This is going to be a type 2 error. So kind of a little chart to follow here. So when your null hypothesis is true and you reject it, you create a type 1 error. If you fail to reject it, you are correct. When your null hypothesis is false and you reject it, you're correct. But if your null hypothesis is false and you fail to reject it, you create a type 2 error. Okay, so let's take a look at this example. So a potato chip producer and its main supplier agree that each shipment of potatoes must meet certain quality standards. If the producer determines that more than 8% of the potatoes in the shipment have blemishes, the truck will be sent away to get another load of potatoes from the supplier. Otherwise, the truckload will be used to make potato chips. To make the decision, a supervisor will inspect a random sample of potatoes from the shipment. The producer will then perform a significance test using the hypothesis as follows, where P is the actual proportion of potatoes with blemishes in a given truckload. So let's describe a type 1 and type 2 error in this setting and explain the consequences of them. So a type 1 error would occur if the producer concludes that the proportion of potatoes with blemishes is greater than 0.08 when the actual proportion is 0.08 or less. So the consequence there would be that the potato chip producer sends the truckload of acceptable potatoes away, which may result in the loss of revenue for the supplier. A type 2 error would occur if the producer does not send the truck away when more than 8% of the potatoes in the shipment have blemishes. The consequence there is the producer uses the truckload of potatoes to make potato chips. More chips will be made with blemished potatoes, which may upset consumers. And in turn, that may also result in loss of revenue if the consumers stop buying. So one more quick example. So a company has developed a new deluxe AAA battery that is supposed to last longer than its regular AAA battery. However, these new batteries are more expensive to produce, so the company would like to be convinced that they really do last longer. Based on years of experience, the company knows that its regular AAA batteries last for 30 hours of continuous use on average. The company selects an SRS of 15 new batteries and uses them continuously until they are completely drained. A significance test is performed using these hypotheses. Now, we don't necessarily know how to run a test with our means just yet, but we're just talking about our type 1, type 2 errors. So we're looking for a null hypothesis for our mean to be 30 hours and our alternative be greater than 30 hours. And then I tell you your p-value, but we're not actually going to run a test. We're just going to describe type 1, type 2 errors and consequences of them. So describe a type 1 error in this setting. Finding convincing evidence that the new batteries last longer than 30 hours on average, when in reality their true mean is 30 hours. So that would be a type 1 error. So describing a type 2 error. If we don't have convincing evidence that the new batteries last longer than 30 hours on average, when in reality their true mean lifetime is greater than 30 hours. So you fail to reject a false null hypothesis. So let's talk about what error we think would be more serious in this case. So really your answers here can vary. Your justification end of it is what will make or break you. So if you can justify why you believe one over the other, you should be fine. So I'm just going to talk about consequences of both of these errors. So type 1 consequence, the company sends the extra money to produce these new batteries when they aren't any better than the older, cheaper type. A type 2 consequence would be an error would be that the company would not produce new batteries, even though they are actually better. So I guess it's what you believe would be a more serious one, but those would be the consequences, or 2 possible consequences that can be made here. And that's it for this video.